Free Me Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the Free Me Podcast show, Free Me TV. This is Thomas Free Me. First and foremost, before we get started in this discussion, let me just give my blessings out to all of my subscribers and all of those that are going through hard times in their life, going through strife. This is why I'm here. This is why I do what I do. Just all of us to try to go through this together with understanding of how to get through it, and just get through it with positivity and motivation and such. So as you know, I work with a lot of crime and death row inmates, lifers, and such, as you saw in my previous episode I did yesterday. Today is an extension of George Skates and everything going on with that. So what we're going to be discussing today is who killed Arthur Smith, which was the original murder that got George Skates in prison to begin with. So we're going to delve into that, and I have a private investigator that is going to be on the show by Mrs. Connie Hughes. So let me bring these ladies in, and we will start discussing. So, ladies, you are live, and we all know who Miss Angie is.
Hi.
So, Miss Connie, if you can go ahead and just give us a brief synopsis of who you are, what you do, and your connection to this case.
My name's Connie Mayhew. I own HSH Investigations. I'm a private investigator, paralegal, and I specialize in post-conviction investigations. And then I also help people that are wanting to or can't afford an attorney, that are, I assist them in drafting pro se motions to file to the courts after the investigation is complete. So I kind of got into it. Just one case kind of caught my eye, and I saw all the things that were wrong with it and decided. I've been working in the criminal justice system for, 12, 13 years, all different areas, prisons, halfway houses, juveniles, have my bachelor's in psychology and about to finish up my master's in criminal justice, and decided that this is what I wanted to do. So, and it's opened my eyes up to a lot of different things, wrongful convictions, and not necessarily wrongful convictions as far as being innocent, but just maybe not convicted of what you were guilty doing, and the violations that are in the misconduct involved in getting those convictions. So Angie reached out to me, how long ago was it? A long time.
January, February, yeah.
And asked just, kind of some, gave me a little background. And at the time, and even now, I can't really take on any pro bono cases just because, I'm just so busy with the rest. And but I kind of advised and talked and got to know the case, and Angie was actually she was on the ground doing all the investigating as far as this and that, talking to people, calling people, getting documents, which helped me be able to assist more in the pro bono aspect of it. And just kind of guiding her when she had something. I would say, yeah, get this, or no, let's, that's not going to really be a big deal. And then when the family went in, met with the district attorney's office and presented some of their concerns, the district attorney was wanting some kind of formal report put together based off of a lot of the information Angie collected and just the documents in general. So They brought me on to do, a review of all the documents and put together a report based on, what was there and what I could see. So hopefully, that's what I did. I went through all the documents I had, and which is part of what I do anyway, but it opened my eyes to a lot more going on in this case than just getting bits and pieces from Angie. So, yeah.
So how do you, being a PI, how do you conduct your business? So when someone like Angie brings this massive amount of information to you, how do you break all of this down and do what you do to find what you find?
Well, I basically reinvestigate the entire case again. I get all the documents from discovery, court documents, trial transcripts, attorney files, police records. I try to get all of that. And then I sit down and I go through every piece of it, looking for anything that, wasn't investigated, wasn't done correctly. I researched the case law behind it. And then once I kind of do that, then I put together a plan as far as, okay, I need to talk to this witness, or I need to go out and talk to all the witnesses that were involved and see if, this is really true. Because a lot of times I'm looking for new evidence, because most of the people that come to me have exhausted all their appeal options, and the only way they can get back into court is new evidence, or, if there's a change in law as far as that goes. So those are the things I really focus on. And misconduct, Brady violations, misconduct on law enforcement, prosecutorial, ineffective counsel. And I try to focus on, okay, how do we prove ineffective counsel? How do we prove this according to the law? Because unless you can justify why this attorney was ineffective following their little prongs that they put out there for you to follow, it's not going to do any good. So, and then once I get all that done, I put it into a report for the client. And if they choose to hire an attorney and provide them with this report to move forward, then they do that. If they are doing their own motion, then they use my report to, file their motion. And then if they want me to help them with drafting their motion, I'll do all all the formatting and getting everything together for them, researching, drafting up the motion. And then it's kind of a collaboration between them and me, changing, adding. And then once we're good, we got a final, then we submit it. And we usually request a court-appointed attorney when we file the motion, just because the whole reason they're doing it pro se is because they can't afford it. So we hope that the arguments that we present are meritorious and the judge grants, a lawyer to do what they need to do. So.
Mm-hmm. And with this particular case, have you been able to contact some of these, because this is a very old case, obviously. So have you been able to contact any of the old people involved in the case?
Angie has actually talked to quite a few of the ones that are still alive that were willing to talk. And a lot of them, the key players, either refused to talk to him or were scared. So
We're dead.
those are the hard ones. And but when I was reviewing the documents, when the Lucasville riot happened, they brought out investigators to investigate the Lucasville riot. At the same time as they were investigating the riot, they investigated the Arthur Smith murder and put together a phenomenal report of all the different people that they talked to. And a lot of them that are now passed, they were able to talk to and get information. Um, and so many things were presented in that report that has never been brought up in the courts.
In the
And I,
Lucasville report.
well, not even the Lucasville, but it's never been brought up again
No,
in Smith.
what I'm saying is the Lucasville investigators, that report that they came up with. You're saying they found more in that investigation that was never brought up in the original trial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yep. So, and I put some of their findings and some of the people that they did talk to, in my report, because I thought that was really important information, especially since we're unable to talk to those people now because they're deceased or they're gone.
Where's that report at now?
It's with the federal public defenders. They were the ones that provided us George's documents in relation to the case that they're working on with George's permission. And that entire investigative report is in their hands pertaining to the Lucasville riot. And then there's a whole nother report pertaining to the Arthur Smith riot or the Arthur Smith murder. Mm-hmm. So,
and what was in that report that wasn't brought forth in trial?
A lot of the witnesses that a lot of the people that had information surrounding the incident that were never talked to.
Why were they not talked to?
Well, that's the big question on this whole entire case. Is there was so many people that I think could have provided beneficial information in the initial investigation that were never talked to. Or, for example, even the family, the district attorney on the case was so awful to the family of Arthur Smith when they brought their concerns and information. They wouldn't even listen to him. Some of the other, this whole case is off of basically jailhouse informants. And they only listened to those that were in jail or associated that told them what they wanted to hear to go towards Arthur, George's guilt and not the innocent part of it. So,
and let me say this just as a reminder for all of us, because I can get carried away with questioning as well, that this is ongoing. And we don't want to say anything that can jeopardize or give anybody awareness to the details of the summary. But I do want to try to find out, these discrepancies as we're getting into without revealing too much. So feel free, like if you want to say, I that's something I'd rather not discuss at this time or whatever, just you have that floor to do so. So I'm just letting you know. So
the FBI got involved, even in Arthur Smith early. They spoke with some of the players, and they knew it smelled. We've got documentation that shows the FBI came in. They did some documentation. They did a profile on the type of person and personality, the person they thought would do it. And then they backed out of it. They said there was no reason for them to be involved because there was no proof for anybody. There were so many different theories about this murder. Well, several months later, the prosecutor, Douglas McElvery, who is now passed, went ahead and picked up the charges and went forward with it, even though the FBI didn't feel there was even a case there. I mean, there was something done. Obviously, a man was murdered. But the FBI...
Well, there's still jurisdiction. So, I mean, with the FBI, because you're telling me that the FBI got involved. So now I'm asking, well, what jurisdiction did the FBI have to get involved? Was there, because he was just a manager of a department
Money,
store,
money that was taken, the amount of money.
the amount of money, and how much money was it?
That's different too. It goes anywhere from zero. Some people, the bookkeeper says there's no money missing, but in a lot of the investigative reports from the police and others, there's over $16,000 missing, and in the polygraph, I see 23,000. So I'm not quite sure how much is missing. Plus, Mr. Smith received his bonus check for the year that same day, which they never said how much it was, but it was a large amount of money. So you figure this, let's say 16,100 is what was quoted somewhere, plus his bonus, maybe 1,000 or two. I guess because the amount of money is,
Well, why is the bookkeeper saying there was no money missing?
I don't know. I'm skeptical on that. There was money in the safe when they went back uh, the next day. There was money in the safe. She says that everything is accounted for. All the money's accounted for. But Arthur Smith or any manager that worked at Rinks at night when they closed, they had to take the money to the night deposit, whether it was that night or in the morning. It didn't matter, but they took it home with them or they took it out of the store. So Arthur Smith would not have deviated. He was sort of a creature of habit. He was very much a businessman and followed the rules. He would have taken that deposit money home. That money couldn't have.
Connie,
Go
Connie,
ahead.
you were smiling, Connie, when I asked that question. Why?
Well, I didn't see any evidence anywhere that there was ever any money taken. Speculation, yeah. No evidence, no witnesses that they talked to or anything. What got me looking at that was the bookkeeper she testified at court that kind of Arthur Smith's routine as far as the deposit goes and how they processed everything and what they did. And she goes into detail about all of that. And she said, normally the deposit was taken during the day because they would require these charge slips from the bank to be brought back, and then they would process them that day. Once in a while, they would do it at night, but she said when they asked her on the stand if when she got there the next morning, if there looked like to be any money missing or any foul play, and she testified that all the money that she had put in there the night before after closing was all there in the safe. And that's what, and there was no like anything petty cash or anything, dollar bills laying on the floor, nothing. She testified that everything looked normal. They didn't really start suspecting anything until Arthur didn't show up to work the next morning. So
Go ahead, sorry.
or not, that was the only thing that I could find that was indicative of any money being missing, period.
So
it was just all speculation.
Well, so where did that speculation begin? And if this woman testified, this is the bookkeeper. If she testified to that at trial, how is speculation even allowed anywhere else? I don't understand.
Well, and this is just my thought process, because I mean, it's really hard to know who actually did this, because there's so many different avenues that could have been investigated initially, according to a lot of the statements that were given and a lot of the information after the fact. But nothing was really done until these jailhouse informants came forward. And
3 years later.
Exactly. And the only thing that they've ever had in their past or done together or been involved in were armed robberies, and it was very, very similar with every robbery that they did and they worked on together. Was they'd go in, they'd rob them, there was never anybody killed according to what they were convicted of. So I don't know if that is what they had to present in order to make it all come together as far as it was an intended robbery, because they're coming forward with all this information and that's what their background is. And it just happened to be on accident this time, somebody was killed, but, it was
That's
just all,
not, yeah,
nothing
right.
was ever, nothing was ever proven. It was just hearsay by this one person. And so I don't know if that's where they had to figure out, okay, there's got to be money missing. If they were trying to rob him and to fit his story of what he was trying to say, we have to put that out there, that there's money missing. But I couldn't find anywhere where there was any documentation, any bank statements, any testimony from managers of the headquarters that there was money missing. There was never anything. And then when she came and testified stating it all looked normal, that's when I started thinking, okay, it's she would know. She was there. She witnessed it. She saw. So there's no other documentation anywhere to prove otherwise.
And that's because they were stealing drugs and guns from Rinks, and that was a good cover-up. Let's use armed robbery. Nobody will ever check about the guns and drugs.
Who was stealing guns and drugs from Rinks?
I don't know. I don't know if Connie's got an idea of exactly who. However, the officials, should I use the names? Because I don't mind using their names. Douglas McElvery was the district attorney at the time. He was known to be crooked and involved in stealing the guns and drugs, not himself, but having people do it. Then they would put him on the streets. Something would happen, the guns, something would happen. A policeman would pull over a person, knowing that they just got this gun illegally, get them for having an illegal gun, arrest them, they would get money, then put that gun right back out there. They resold those stolen guns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so as far as names and such, it's up to you guys, but as long as this is public record, right? Now where it gets into, and I want to be careful of again, is making sure that what we say can be factual. You know what I mean? So I don't want to get into like bulleting things off. This guy was doing this, doing that, doing this. Okay, hold on. What do you mean? Okay, so this Douglas McElvery, you say?
McElvery, yes.
Okay. He was the prosecutor?
Yes.
Okay.
He was.
And he had knowledge of guns and drugs.
Logan County in Bell Fountain.
I'm sorry? And he had knowledge of guns and drugs being ran or distributed through the store?
It was said by many people. He didn't handwrite it himself.
Right.
But if you speak to people or you go on the Bell Fountain Facebook page, you'll read it yourself, that there was a lot of crooked things going on between the police department and the prosecutor. Logan County, for just all of Logan.
And some of the things that could back that up, those theories are the previous investigators, when they were there talking to people about, the Arthur Smith murder. There was numerous statements that they got from people about the corruption that was going on, with law enforcement and McElvery, and some of the things that he was part of and doing. Whether there's anything to back it up other than those statements at that time. I mean, we'll probably never know, just because whatever was going on is gone. But just the multiple statements that are very similar about the situation, raises a red flag.
Right. And this is again what I want to point out to the viewers is this is something that this crime occurred in 1978, correct?
79.
And a lot of the players are past, deceased. So we're only working with a few of those players. And as you heard, a lot of them are scared. A lot of them are still, interacted with the crime itself. So, and a lot of the facts just aren't there. So we're trying to provide what we can provide, but there is going to be speculation. But I think we can apply a certain amount of logic to the speculation,
Yes.
right? So, sticking with the bookkeeper, like, what motive would she have to lie if that's what she did? Is there? You don't see. There's no motive. Is she alive, or has she passed on?
She's alive. Let me get my information.
And
She is alive.
and has anybody spoken with her?
I've tried to call her 3 or 4 times and left her messages. I get an answer machine. She never calls me back. I have a background check on everyone. Let me look and see what notes I have on her. She could be related to someone because it seems like a lot of people are related to each other there in Bellefontaine. So I may have notes, but
Well, I guess again because I want to figure out like where the breakdown in the investigation occurred at, as much as we can tell. Why didn't the police really fulfill a thorough investigation? Was there agenda behind that? You know, were they just looking at George from the beginning, or you know, was it just this robbery and then they weren't even looking at George until this Jimmy guy decided to turn snitch?
they never looked at George until Jimmy turned snitch.
Okay,
Jack
so
Benton kicked it all off, but Jimmy ended up being the one that testified. Um, Jimmy is the only one that testified against George, and he was angry because George wouldn't come up with the bond money to get him. Jimmy was already serving 37 to 100 years in prison. He'd already been sentenced, but he was on some type of an appeal to where he could bond out. Jimmy started snitching on people. George found out and said, "I'm not going to bond you out." Jimmy got mad
I see.
and
That's
reached
where
out
my
to
confusion was at is I kept hearing that Jimmy was incarcerated, but yet that he was out, doing the thing. So okay, so he bonded out on an appeal. He was out on appeal from a
no, he tried to get out. George wouldn't do it. They didn't get him out. So Jimmy got mad. He contacted the prosecutor and made a deal. The prosecutor then transported him to the Logan County Jail. Then he was allowed to go to his daughter's baton, his son's baseball games. Went to the VFW. Was given all kinds of privileges, but he never bonded out. Then he was promised a shorter sentence and a total immunity on every charge, including he admitted to killing Arthur Smith. He got total immunity for that and the robbery and all the other robberies. So this man in 1983, when they went to court, was sentenced to 37 to 100 years. In 2005, he was paroled. He's out walking our streets right now here in Ohio.
I see.
He had murdered Arthur Smith.
And the other thing is George's name never came up until Jimmy and Diane, his wife, were indicted on all these charges. Once the first Jack Benton came forward and was talking about all these other robberies, and then the Diane disclosed George's supposed or alleged involvement, and they had initially indicted his wife and him on all of these charges, and then that's when Jimmy brought George into it.
They indicted Diane, Jimmy Rogers' wife, in order to secure Jimmy's testimony, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there was at least, and correct me, Connie, because you may know, I don't remember the exact number, but there were at least 8 people that was involved in this case that received total and complete immunity that claimed to have had a part in either the murder, the robbery, the planning of, the casing of Rinks, had a plan or part of it. They got total immunity. George had nothing to do with it. He got life in prison.
Honestly, I don't know if any of them were even involved in this at all.
Right.
Well, that was what my question was going to be is how creditable are these witnesses?
Well, Diane and Jimmy and one other one, I know Diane and Jimmy were convicted of perjury charges on three different cases because they tried to get Jimmy off of another case. And they found out that they were lying, and they charged and convicted him with perjury. So the whole motive that Jimmy would have had was he was going to benefit huge from making a deal with the prosecution. And once he gave that information on George, I think they stopped looking at any other avenue, and they focused on that, putting it together. And the reason, the thing is this would have been an easy thing for them to come forward and provide information on, because almost every detail of what happened was in the media, in the newspaper.
Right.
It was one of the top stories read in the state of Ohio for that year.
I mean, as far as the address, where he was found, how he was found, the car that was being driven, the kicker with that is that, and the reason why I don't think that they may have been involved in any of it, but it was going to benefit Jimmy with his other charges, was testified in court that he was struggling to drive the car because it was a manual stick shift, and he couldn't figure out he was having troubles with the clutch, right? He testified, it's on record, and they talked about it. He testified to it. Well, there's photos of the actual car itself, and there's no clutch in the car. It's a automatic stick shift. So that right there, now that small detail wasn't part of what was in the media. Right. Plus, the other thing at the crime scene, there's a photograph, and there's two different cigarette butts, two different brands, that they take pictures. They make a point to take pictures of these two cigarettes that are right around the area of the body. And George Skates doesn't smoke, but there's two different brands of cigarette butts right in that area. And nothing was ever done with them. As far as I could find, I couldn't find anything regarding those cigarettes.
They don't have them anymore.
Plus, the way that the victim's body was in the crime scene photos don't line up with how Jimmy said George told him it happened. Because he's laying on his head, he's laying on his stomach, basically, pretty much his side, but most of his body is face down in the dirt, right? His head, everything. Well, the gunshot wound was to the front of his head. And if that was the case and he was shot in the front of the head, he would have been lying on his back, because that would have
lack of blood too at the scene.
Right.
That's another deal.
I'm not even convinced that this is Arthur Smith's body in these pictures, because there's a tattoo on the guy's hand, and George Smith or Arthur Smith didn't have any tattoos. So it's very,
well, how certain are you that it's a tattoo?
100%.
100% certain that it's a tattoo. And Arthur Smith had no tattoos? Sure. If you can, hold the picture up to the camera and let me see.
Let me find it. Go ahead.
And okay, so, all right.
Oh, it might be in the report. I put a picture in the report.
So, who was Arthur Smith? Was there any reason that he was involved in illegal activities himself? Was he laundering money through his store? Was there anything to show that he was dealing with shady characters?
Arthur Smith was a good, upstanding, honest man. He was described as very well liked by the employees. He was very much a businessman, followed the rules. He was tough when you broke them, but fair. No one ever said anything bad or negative about him. The reason how Arthur Smith got involved, and his daughter said it best this morning, is he stumbled across some information, the guns and drugs, and those people knew that he stumbled across it. He started keeping a black book, information on it. He had spoke to his adult children and told them, this old man's got some information about some officials here, and heads are going to roll, and people just aren't going to believe it when I expose it. A week later, he was murdered. Arthur was moved around from Rinks to Rinks, different stores, because he was known to get things in order. If something was wrong, he fixed it. This Rinks was brand new, so they put him there to try to get it off to a good start. And that's how come he found the discrepancies with possibly the guns. And again, that is not hardcore fact. It's just said.
And the black book has never been located.
Right.
Okay, so Mr. Smith is murdered to cover up the underground dealings, right? That is or has been associated, right? Allegedly. So we're just paraphrasing here. We're just shooting ideas out. So he's murdered to hide this illegal activity going on that is allegedly being ran by the prosecutor, and his name is
Douglas McElvery.
Douglas McElvery. Okay, so now several years goes by, and this murder has been unsolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until
they think they solved it. They covered it up, and then when Lucasville happened, they all breathed a little bit of relief because they thought nobody would ever care.
Okay, what do you mean that they think that they solved it and they covered it up?
Well, they blamed it on George. They got somebody in prison. That was the thing. They just wanted somebody to.
Well, this is what I'm just trying to get the timeline in my head of events. So he's murdered, and then how long after that does the Lucasville riots occur?
He's murdered in 1979. George went to court for that murder in 1983. The Lucasville riots happened in April of 1993. So 10 years later, George was 10 years into his sentence. Okay,
so what happened in between 1979 and 1983 that George?
There was this I think is very interesting. You're talking about evidence, just real quick. Douglas McElvery, and it's in the court files, that he filed a motion to have all. This was in 1989-ish. He filed a motion to have all exhibits and all evidence returned back to his office. The next day, it's documented. Michael Brady, who's a judge, now went and picked up all the information, the exhibits and the evidence, and supposedly taking it back to the prosecutor's office. Well, it's missing. That's a good way to keep people from looking into anything else.
The evidence that Michael Brady, which is a judge now, brought to Douglas McElvery is missing. It's never been found.
Every bit of it.
And yes. What evidence was that? Do we know?
Well, like Connie mentioned, the cigarette butts. DNA testing could have been done on that. The belt that was wrapped around that was used to help tie him up. The wires that was around his ankles. His shoes that would have had fingerprints on it. You know, I mean,
all that evidence is missing.
Everything is gone. I've been in personal tie, Bureau of Criminal Investigation. I have a huge binder full. They've got some results, but they don't have like DNA. They didn't have it then. So like Connie brought up with the cigarette butts, we could have had DNA testing done on them, but we can't now because nothing is available anymore.
Has anybody reached out to Michael Brady?
No, I started having some bad feelings, bad responses from some people, some threats. So I kind of backed off of contacting people for now.
Who threatened you?
Well, the one person was Rogers.
Jimmy Rogers, the snitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think I tend to agree with Connie. I wonder if they even had anything to do with it, because it said that the widow, the wife of Arthur Smith, may have been she was extra friendly with one of the police officers. He's now passed away. My contact with the police and the sheriff hasn't been positive about this case. When I've straight up asked the question or said, George Skates did not commit this murder of Arthur Smith, not one of them officers or sheriffs said, yes, he did. We have proof. What they said was, to paraphrase, he may not have done that, but he's done other things to get himself in prison. And then the sheriff said, you don't know him. He was just a scary guy. Well, what's more scary in America? Somebody that looks scary or going to prison for something you didn't do?
And you said that you have recording of them saying that. Okay.
Yes, I do. Yep.
Okay.
And the initial snitch, Jack Benton, who started it all off, I have the recording of him saying to me, George wasn't even there. George had nothing to do with it. Jack, and that's what Jack said. Jack started it, but he was a friend of Jimmy's.
Who is Jack Benton?
Jack Benton started it all off. He was a friend of Jimmy's. And there was Danny Stanley, Jack Benton, and Jimmy Rogers. Those three were all in prison together. They were also associates on the outside. They did some jobs together. George might have been involved, might not have been. But Jack wanted out of prison. Jack knew Jimmy had committed some shootings and some other things prior. So he contacted the prosecutor initially. That's how Jimmy's name got brought into it. Does that make sense? Help me, Connie. Okay.
Yep. I was going to bring Connie in. Yeah. So because I want Connie to collaborate at everything that's being said. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, it was, I don't know where this came in, but there was a private investigator involved, which also seems very shady. That was Jimmy Rogers and Diane Rogers' investigator for their attorney. So they were under the assumption that this investigator was working with their attorney and for them. And he had went with Diane to visit Jimmy to get some information. Diane provided him with a lot of information surrounding Jimmy, this and that. At the same time, this same investigator was working with the prosecutor's office. And
we have a signed contract for that.
But this investigator didn't disclose any of that information to Diane or Jimmy, or even their attorney. So it was he was getting information from the prosecutors, or for the prosecutors.
He's a spy.
Yes. And so then that's when it was Diane came into the picture, and now she's being looked at for all of the stuff that Jimmy was being looked at. And then supposedly she went into the whole hearsay of what Jimmy told her about George and this and that. And then when Jimmy came, the thing is, the only evidence that they presented at trial, in order to convict George Skates, was Jimmy Rogers' testimony, saying that George told him he did it. Not that he witnessed it, not that he, it was basically hearsay. George told me he did it. That's
because
it.
Jimmy supposedly had dropped George and Mr. Smith off out in the country so he could take the Volkswagen back to Rinks, or the apartments behind Rinks, so he could get his car, for whatever sense that makes. And when he got back with his car to pick up George, that's when George said, I had to shoot the MFer. That's when Jimmy says he found out. But he leaves George with all this money and the assistant manager out in the middle of nowhere. They don't know the town. They're not from there. And he drove all the way back to Rinks to get his car because he was having troubles driving the Volkswagen. And with that, I wanted to read this. This is a handwritten letter from the ex-wife of Jack Benton. This is just a part of it. This letter is sent to the wife of the snitch, Diane Rogers. And it says, you probably don't get very good mileage. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. How is that Monte Carlo running since I put the magic touch on it? Guess it could really be worse. You probably don't get very good gas mileage with it, do you? You should buy yourself a Volkswagen, ha ha, or something like that. Maybe McGalvery, Doug would buy it for you. He does do about anything you ask him to. Talk about having someone wrapped around your little finger. You and Jimmy sure done a job on him. The whole town, for that matter. That was some kind of con job you two put on him. I bet he'll never be the same. Tell me, just how did I get on the subject of Doug? Beats me too. Speaking of Doug, he will be out of the office here pretty soon. What are your plans then? Has he got it all set up for you to still have money and survive? I'm sure he won't leave you out in the cold. You and Jimmy really took a lot of weight off his shoulders, so he should take good care of you for the rest of your life. I'm sure you would go for that. And then it goes on talking about George.
And that letter's from who?
It's the letter from a lady named Tammy. She's the ex-wife of Jack Benton. She also was having an affair with Jimmy Rogers. They're all intermingled, interconnected.
Yeah, because I'm picking up jealousy in that. I'm picking up some kind of jealousy in those words, spite and jealousy, and wow.
But they were friends. She was friends with Diane. Now, the letter is not signed by that person. It's signed by a Steve. But after looking at the letters, I'm not a handwriting expert, but when you look at all the letters and the common letters used, it's from someone that definitely has intimate knowledge. And then they refer to putting George away because he was such a heavy hitter and a big drug dealer. That goes back to, it was said that McElvery sold pot and George sold pot. His pot started making it into Logan County, started taking some money out of people's pockets. They didn't like it. So get rid of George. I have it in writing that the ultimate plan from McElvery was to convict George, get him in prison, not follow through with his promises to Jimmy. Somehow Jimmy and George would end up in the same prison. George would kill Jimmy, and that would take care of both of his problems.
Now, see, okay. Me being in this lifestyle, right? Things like that just don't occur, and I don't know if George is gonna come forward with this or not, but you just don't. If I push my product or I come into a new area with my product, right? I'm just not gonna get whacked or you know what I mean? It just doesn't happen that way. There's going to be a meeting, right? And there's going to be a meeting and there's going to be a discussion between these two entities as to are these two entities willing to join forces and create some powerhouse, you see? Or so George.
I got an answer for that.
Okay, let me hear it.
There was a big bust right before that of a motorcycle club that George associated with. And it led to that. The person was part of that club. That was my dad. No, thanks. And that's how George got connected in with the marijuana and all that, and into Logan County.
Well, no, but but the motorcycle club and that plug that you're speaking of had nothing to do with Doug and his organization.
He had to do with Logan County, though. He had a lot to do with Logan County.
Let me ask you this. I agree. I see what you're saying, and I agree that that would typically be what takes place. But would you say that a person that's in the public eye, that's a public authority figure, would do something like that if he's trying to keep it hidden?
No, of course not. No. Of course not. And see, me being the plug, right? I'm the plug. I don't have any associations with any kind of illegal activities because I'm the plug. I'm the supplier, right? So I have somebody that I know is at my beck and call, whether I have them in my pocket some kind of way or I have them on a leash in some manner that they are what we call my do boy, right?
Yeah.
This is my do boy, and this is the one that I send out to go collect my money, to deliver my drugs, to do all
Right.
my underground dealings. But me being the plug, are you crazy? You can't even get in. You can't even get in my car with drugs on you.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think a lot of that is still, a lot of that stuff is just based off of different statements or hearsay, that type of thing, more speculation as far as the whole situation of who could it have been, or what, if it wasn't George, who could it have been? And I think a lot of times what I focus on my cases, because I do have cases where there's that kind of culture of, it's against the code to snitch, it's against the code to give out people's names, this and that. So I go into it a lot of times with, I'm not trying to prove who actually did it, because that's really ultimately is going to be the prosecutor's responsibility, law enforcement's responsibility to prove that. What I go into it is, how do I prove that the guy that is convicted of this charge is innocent? What can I find to prove his innocence? And then, once you're able to do that, then it's on somebody else to do the job to figure out, okay, who did it? We've proved this guy innocent, which it's nice to have the different theories, and it's wonderful when they're willing to provide you with the names of the individuals responsible.
yeah,
But I understand why a lot of people don't also, just because not necessarily that it's just against the code, but like in the different gang style life, the gang lifestyles in that culture, sometimes doing that is you're going to end up dead, or your family's going to end up dead, or something bad could happen if you did that. So it's more of a protective mechanism in some cases also, other than just, the code type thing. So I kind of approach it in that aspect when I'm doing some of these cases, is how do we prove, and is trying to prove who actually did it. Because in this case, it's hard to tell. I have no idea, because
well,
there's
and
no.
that's and this is why I'm trying to build a likability. I guess because when we sit here and we say off the top of our head that a prosecutor is dirty or a prosecutor is corrupt, our first instinctual thought is that's impossible, right? Or that's not right. And what I'm trying to do, because this is a big MO of mine, is to show the world how much power prosecutors have, right, in this nation, and what they're able to do with that power unchecked with immunity, right? So let me ask this, and I want to ask this, and then we're running out of time again, so I don't know if we want to reconnect and finish, which I don't mind. But let me ask this quickly. How plausible is it for a prosecutor to run an organization, is what we're talking about?
100% possible. The prosecutor to run an organization.
Just to be dual sided like that, to be able to put up a front that they're for the people, that they're a prosecutor upholding justice, but really behind closed doors running a criminal enterprise.
Go ahead, Connie. You've got more experience.
It comes down to it as it's we're all human, and the choices that we make are based off of our motivation. What's our motivation in doing whatever it is? Even with criminality, a lot of criminals, their motivation is money, or and a lot of times that's what it is. So they're motivated by that. And what would be one's motivation to be free? If I'm going to be offered, to be free from prison or my crimes, and I'm going to be able to make money in the meantime, that's the motivation behind it. What was Doug's motivation? I don't know. Power. Was he motivated by power in a small town? That helped get him more power than what he had. And so I think it comes down to everybody's human, and you can't tell me that people in a high position within our government, legislature, our criminal justice system aren't going to, um, you know, uh, commit illegal acts if it's going to benefit them one way or another.
And
It's just,
this is absolutely correct, and this is my point. This is the point of what you just said, Connie. Not to cut you off, but the importance of that is, again, the overarching message that I'm trying to drive home to Americans is that these prosecutors have immunity, and what that means is the perniciousness of that is that when you have the amount of power that a prosecutor has, and you back that up with immunity, then what that person experiences, they could be the most humble, down to earth person in the world until they come under that amount of power, and this is our cancer in America. The prosecutor and immunity is what is driving this force of all of
Yes.
this wrongful convictions, innocent people in prison, people on death row that doesn't need to be. Okay, guys. Um, Angie or somebody, there's a TV in the background that's kind of a little
That's
too
me.
loud. It's just a
That's
little
my.
too loud.
I'm gonna have to go in another room because let me go in the other room.
Okay. It's definitely getting louder.
Yeah, gotta go to the living room.
It's getting hotter, hotter, colder, colder,
How's
colder.
that? Is that better?
That is better.
Okay.
It was just drowning you out a little bit too much, and I didn't want because I want to make sure that you're well heard.
Thank you. Yeah, that's that. It's my dad. I have it. I wanted to tell you, I have it a handwritten, if I can find them again, a handwritten notes from Doug McElvery, which are amazing because they're so detailed. And it says in there, when it pertaining to Jimmy and a few of the key players, um, the information was given to them, details given to, and then he's got a list of names. Do you remember that, Connie? It was on Jerry Whitaker's paper because there's more people involved than just the ones that we've mentioned. So I'm going to find all that for you, Thomas, and I'll send that to you.
Well, I guess what I'm interested in is Michael Brady, right? I'm very interested in Michael Brady because he was the one that last seen this evidence that came up missing, right? And he needs to speak up to the fact that there was this evidence and what it occurred, or what the evidence was.
But he may
Um,
not know either. He may have given it to Mr. McElvery and then it disappeared. I'm not.
well, well, yeah, we need to find out, but there is documentation that Michael Brady was ordered or instructed to bring this evidence to him. And next that we know, Douglas is saying that he never received it.
No, that's not. No, Douglas never said that. The prosecutor's office currently now
Is
says they don't have it. They don't know where it is. They've even conferred with the clerk of courts because that's not
got
a
it.
common occurrence.
All we know is that it was never brought up in the trial. So at the time of trial, we don't even know that this evidence is there. Right? Is that correct? Is that fair to
I
say?
know at trial it was right because they entered some of those exhibits, right? The
Right,
wire
right. Those
and
exhibits, all that was ordered to be given back to Douglas McElvery
After trial.
after trial.
Got it. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, this guy, if he is involved in it, he wants this evidence back. For what purpose? Purpose if it's been admitted into trial, other than for appeal reasons,
Keep people from testing it any further, to keep
for
anything from
appeal,
coming
right?
out.
Just to destroy the evidence. Uh,
Yes.
um, which is probably, I don't know. I don't know what the statute is behind Ohio and their law as far as evidence after trial, because I know after a length of time it is destroyed. Connie, can you weigh in on that?
Well, I think every state is different, and I
Yep.
think those those uh, those records or those procedures have changed over time. So back then, it might have been, okay, so if they're sentenced to 50 years in prison, then we can destroy after 10 or 15 years. If they're sentenced to life in prison, then we can destroy after 20 years. But a lot of the new procedures on the retention policies for cases are based off of how many years they were convicted to serve in prison. If you get a life without parole sentence, then they can never destroy that evidence. But that's more recent, because I've had a couple cases where, like back in 2002, their retention policy was after so many years they could destroy it. But now their retention policy is different. So depending on when they destroyed it, they're doing it based off of whatever those policies were at the time. So that's what yeah.
And we
No
don't
one's
know
accountable now.
And
Like,
we would have
go ahead.
we would have to know what their retention policy was back then, if they even had them. I don't know if they even had retention policies back during that time.
Well, Doug is still alive, right?
No.
Oh.
Yeah. One second.
Can we dig him up? Can we dig him up and ask him questions?
I'd love to. There was pictures taken. At Rinks had a surveillance system. They had pictures. It's documented in Mr. McElvery's handwriting, waiting for photos to come back from Rinks. No one has those pictures. They cannot be found anywhere. Those pictures could be the answer. Whoever, because it was said that Mr. Smith supposedly at closing of Rinks drove his car to the front of the store and parked it, and then went back into the store, did what he had to do, and then came back out and got in his car. Those pictures would have told a lot, and they're gone.
Well, they weren't even at trial.
Right. Weren't even brought up.
Whether Lou Williams even had those pictures, as far as, in his, because they would have had to disclose that or handed those over to Lou Williams also. Mm-hmm. So that's, yeah, there's a lot of
accountability.
Okay.
There's a lot that Lou Williams, his defense attorney, didn't get, tried to get, argued over and over again with the judge, saying they haven't disclosed this, this evidence. I'm waiting for it. And it was interesting how hard he had to fight just to get some of this evidence turned over that they stated they had, but he hadn't seen.
Got it. So let me ask this. So Connie, in your experience, how many cases have you seen like this?
A few, quite a few, actually. As far as the person not even being a part of the crime or anywhere in the area. And oh my gosh, almost every single one of them have to do with a jailhouse informant, accepting leniency.
But before we got cut off, we were talking about the power of prosecutors and the power that they wield and why they would go corrupt, and what you just said, Angie, is essential, and it's key, and it's sticking with, again, like my Friday morning message, is in life, we are consumed in a field of sharks, right? We know that when we leave our house, we're stepping into a shark tank, and we're surrounded by sharks. And as we know, sharks are reactive to their environment. They don't have no thought process. They're just machines that react to their environment as it comes. And when they smell blood, it shuts down all thought process, all other they just go into a frenzy, and they'll swim for miles at the drop of a blood in water, right? And this is the type of environment, the world that we're in, and we get caught up in our emotions, going out, wanting to have friends, wanting to be accepted, and just taking anybody into our life, that we bring in. And we put ourselves in situations for corruption to take advantage of our naivety, I guess, our niceness. This is why they say nice guys finish last. I'm one of those nice guys, and because of my wanting to be surrounded by friends and feel like I had friends, I surrounded myself with these sharks, not realizing that I was in a pool full of sharks that only thought about themselves and eating. And that's where I learned that we have to become sharks ourselves in order to survive in a pool full of sharks. But it's having a guiding light. It's knowing why you're pretending to be a shark in this pool full of sharks in order to maneuver through them and get through to the other side, which is calmer waters. So as we're going through life, we have to understand that when we step out of our home, right, we have to become something that we may not particularly like being. And we always have to, as I said this morning, pay attention to the little things in life that makes us appreciate what we do have, so that we don't lose our guidance and become like a corrupt prosecutor, right? That when he leaves, he feels like he has all of this power and he can make his life better and his family's life better, but he's doing it at the expense of other human beings, right? He's doing it at the expense of other human beings that are trying to make their lives better as well, And because he has a one-up in the game of life, and he wields a little more power than the next individual, he capitalizes off that, and that's where you lose sight of the little things.
Of humanity. And
Right.
and I always say, the criminal justice system is supposed to get, justice for the victims, and they're supposed to make sure that, they're doing a service to everybody that they serve. But in the process of, in that corruption, they somehow lose sight that by doing what they do and get involved in what they get involved in, and cutting corners and, putting people away that may or shouldn't be put away, they're only contributing to taking more victims in the process, not getting justice for the victims that were, victim of that crime. They're taking more victims down.
Yes.
By doing that.
They're
And then
victimizing victims.
The other thing is not just with the innocent, does this happen to in this effect, right? But the corners that they may cut when they're trying to convict somebody that is guilty, whether it's violating their constitutional rights by, whatever it might be, to get that conviction, even though they may be guilty. Now you're leaving the door open for them to get their case overturned. And then what justice are you doing for those victims at that point? If, so you're really, they lose sight of what they're trying to do. And that's to give justice to those that deserve it. And cutting corners is doing such a disservice to everybody, whether you're guilty or innocent.
In this case too, it's with like Sheila the daughter has said to me numerous times, when they met with the prosecutor recently, she said that was so long overdue, that she just wanted to be heard, that the original prosecutor wouldn't give them the time of day. I was looking at some papers just a few minutes ago, and the only people that they actually even collected fingerprints on was the family of Arthur Smith. And the death of Arthur Smith is a horrible crime. It's a horrible thing that happened, and the way that it happened. And Sheila has lived with this, the family has lived with this, but it's affected the way she mothered. It affected how she associated with people, how she loved. it affected a lot in her
Oh,
life.
sure. It altered the path of her life,
Not to
you know.
mention knowing they feel 100% that George is innocent. So now not only did she lose her father with a horrible crime, a man that didn't do it is in prison for it.
Right. And the killer is still out free living their life as if they got away with murder,
At the
you
power
know.
of
Uh,
a prosecutor.
and
Uh,
look at the whole Lucasville thing. I mean, and this is out on Netflix, the whole
Yep.
situation and the murder of the guard. You know, did that family actually get justice, or are the ones that actually were responsible for killing the guard walking the streets because they decided to, you know, sign a plea with the prosecution in order for their freedom and not get, what the other ones did,
Right. And
you
that's and I,
know?
and that's what I want to touch on, because what you were speaking on before, Connie, was essentially what we just watched and witnessed as America. And again, I keep bringing this up because it's important that America makes this connection with Bill Cosby, right? What you just described and what is going on in the case with with Mr. Skates is what we watched with Bill Cosby, right? The prosecutor knew, or felt they knew, that this man was guilty and felt the pressure on them to incarcerate this man. And they did so knowingly that they were committing an unconstitutional error. But yet, to get that conviction, to get that praise, oh, they did it. They got him locked up. That was the goal, the motive, the agenda to lock this man up unconstitutionally, knowing, as you said, Connie, that it's going to keep the emotions stirred. Not only are you taking the victims on a super high, but you know that you're getting ready to drop them down like a sack of rocks, and you're intentionally doing this all in hopes for your glory of convicting this man. And there's no, again, because of immunity, you know that you can do this unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
Ruin
So
someone's life.
so this is what we watched. And I know that it's a tough line, because the difference between Bill Cosby and Mr. Skates, of course, is there is no discrepancy. You had a bunch of women that gathered up enough courage to step forth and yell about what happened to them, right? Whereas Mr. Skates doesn't have that. Nobody's coming forth saying he was guilty. He was brought into something because he was an easy target. As Angie said earlier, she has recordings of these guys, these officers, saying he was a scary guy. He needed to be off the street. And you guys, and I'm sure, Connie, you can agree, there are so many individuals that are locked up in prison because prosecutors feel like they need to be off the street.
Or, yeah, they haven't been able to catch them yet, but they know, and build a case against them for this or that. But they get an opportunity and they're like, oh, I can get them off the street now. Let's make this happen. And I don't know how many people that I've interviewed in law enforcement that have made that exact same statement was, I don't know that he was actually guilty of committing this crime, but he was guilty of a lot of other crimes. So it's not a big deal to have him locked up. Justice was still done. But in reality, no, that's not what our system is supposed to be about. Not making more victims in the process. It's supposed to help keep from, victimizing people, and we're failing. And the sad thing is it the public, unless somebody in the public experiences going through the criminal justice system, either negatively or positively, have a loved one that's incarcerated, and and they know that it was wrong, or the general public doesn't know what goes on. They trust that our prosecutors and our, and law enforcement are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that they're not cutting corners until they're actually involved in it. And so I think a huge part of, getting this information out there and exposing the things that are happening, and not with everybody. I mean, just like law enforcement, there's good prosecutors, there's some good things going on, positive things going on in the criminal justice system, but there's also those bad things that are, affecting so many people. And it's got to be awareness. The public's got to understand. Otherwise, they're going to keep doing what they're going to do, because the majority is going to be the ones voting for us. So we need to look good to them because we want their votes so we can stay in office.
Right. And again, that's what I'm trying to do, is tie all of this together about the power of the prosecutor, because at the end of the day, the detectives turn all their work over to the prosecutor. The investigators turn all of their work over to the prosecutor, right? The media, who do they talk to? The prosecutor. So this prosecutor has the ability to manipulate all of this evidence in any kind of way that he wants to, and then report it to the media. So now the media takes that and reports it to the public, which now is where you're pulling your jury pool from, who, you know what I mean? So when you have a highly publicized case like Mr. Skates, and you have what it appears to be a completely corrupt individual that obviously probably died a happy death with his family all around him and such, So you have this individual that,
well, here's his power.
What just gets away with this stuff, and how as us common people, how am I, right? How am I supposed to look at life and abide by the rules, stick to the rules, stop at the red lights, don't run red lights, and do these things, and struggle to get by as a convicted convict when I can make my life so much easier, right? But how am I expected to stick by the rules when I got to sit here and see these people do what they do? I mean, come on, man.
We got to fight. We have to fight against him, and we have to do it because not for ourselves, but for our kids and for our grandchildren and for those kids, the future generations. It's important to get the right people and to know who you're voting in and to pay attention and speak up.
We have to get rid of immunity. Prosecutors have to be accountable for these type of actions, man. They have to be able to answer to them. They have to be able to answer to them. They have to be accountable for them. You cannot have a person in a seat that has that much power and yet fearless of any kind of repercussions.
Well, and just out of curiosity, I mean, how often do you hear that the victim's family, right? The victim's family testifies for the defense at a trial.
And he's still found guilty.
Yes.
He had 2 autopsies at the orders of Douglas McElvery. The Logan County coroner went to the crime scene. He observed Mr. Smith's body, or so they said, Mr. Smith. He supposedly had started an autopsy. He did an observation. The next day he made a statement. It's in the newspaper. Of the time of death he thought it was, but it didn't fit with McElvery's timeline. So he contacted Hamilton County's coroner, Dr. Jolly, had the body transported there where he had a second autopsy. And that statement then coincided with what McElvery needed. They tried to cover that first one.
And I think that's why he wouldn't listen to the family either of the victim, is because their didn't fit the narrative. And so, I mean, he totally disrespected them, wouldn't talk to them, slammed the door in Bruce Lyle's face, Um, so that to me was just, you don't see that in most cases. The victim's family is always going to testify for the state, for the prosecution, if they testify at all. Rarely, I don't know that I have a case where I've seen a family member, as close family members, daughters, brother-in-laws,
right.
testify for the defense. So that's very indicative of how this whole case was messed up from the get-go.
Well,
Okay.
let's give Eric Stewart some credit too, for sure. I want to just do a shout out. He's the prosecutor of Logan County.
Well, that's
That's
what I was just getting ready to get into was this guy. So everything that we've discussed, everything that we discussed, and that's only just a scratch of the surface of all of the evidence that was uncovered by Connie. So all of this has been wrapped up, packaged for this prosecutor that you just mentioned, who has shown that he is willing to tune in and to listen to all of this evidence, and he has shown, can I say, concern, maybe over the maybe potential corruption within this case and his office.
I think
he's interested.
I think he's interested in seeing the factual evidence that is, that's inconsistent, and the things that have never been seen or weren't seen that was collected, after the fact. I think it's just more, those type of things. And the summary is basically get him interested enough to maybe take a second look at it and see if there's, anything that they may have that hasn't been, that Angie hasn't uncovered, or,
So what happens? What happens if he takes this and he looks at it and he says, you know what, there's something here?
That would be one. That's more than are, right? And that's ultimately, I would think that that's where we would want to get in our criminal justice system, is everybody working together for the to benefit everybody, the best outcome. What is the truth?
Just to make sure the truth was told, man.
And what's it to me? Why can't I, instead of us going through the process of the courts and this and that and writing motions and doing this, why couldn't we present what we found as an investigator to a district attorney's office and say, hey, I think that this might be wrong, and work together with them, even defense attorneys, work together with them saying, look, we're finding this and this doesn't look right. Can we maybe, see what we can do to relook at it? But I think some are going in that direction, but it's still, just like with the courts, it still takes a lot to convince them and to get to the point of wanting to admit that somebody screwed up. That's the kicker, is nobody wants to say they messed up.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, because the thing of it is where you find one roach, you'll find 50 others. And that's the thing, is they don't want to pull back that cover, because who knows what else it's going to expose. Right.
And so, you have people that wait for a specific district attorney or judge or whoever to get done with their term, and somebody else get reelected before they present their case, because it's a fresh set of eyes. It's somebody that maybe wasn't involved and would be willing and have a different perspective and outlook on how things are supposed to work, so.
Okay, so you guys turned this over, I think, 2 weeks ago? Okay.
Yeah, about 2 weeks.
So we're probably talking maybe 2 to 4 months before we hear something, maybe? You think
It's
sooner
not going
than
to get that long.
Yeah. He told me that he was, it was going to take him a bit to go through and process everything, but he was reviewing it, and I commend anybody that's willing to at least
It's all we
take the
want is right. Somebody just to listen and just take a look at what we got.
yeah,
Yes.
and not be afraid of, you know, um, because of where he's at now or what's been going on in the past or what the public perception is right now without all this information, being able to say, you know, without all those fears behind you of
Courage.
making the wrong
Well,
decision.
and this is what I want to say, right? And I'll wrap it up here. Is exactly what you're saying, Connie. Is and again, my message is the morale of this country, right? As far as us citizens and our prosecutors, our law enforcement, and such, we need honor. We're asking our government officials to just be honorable, right? And what that means, this is why I say there are no good cops. And again, it's not to say that these aren't good human beings who put on, they're great at home with their wives, they're perfect gentlemen, all of these things. They tell themselves they're good men. But when you put on that uniform, when you put on that suit and tie, and you're going in that courtroom or whatever, not allowing that to change who you are and willing to give up that position if that's the honorable thing to do, to make sure that you're not corrupting our judicial system and you're not sending innocent people to prison because they're on drugs or they have mental disabilities or they just don't understand how to interact with life. And to you, they may seem like a throwaway, an easy candidate for a conviction. We need honor, and it has to happen. We have to make that, us citizens have to make that happen. And in order to make that happen, we have to come together as one voice, one agreement. We don't have to agree with culture, race, things of that nature. But what we have to agree on is that we're American citizens and we're losing our democracy. We're losing our rights. We're losing our freedom. And unless we can come together and understand that and make a change, it's as well as gone, and we'll just join the rest of the world as a socialistic country in some fashion.
Well, and then just, let get back to basic humanity,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing that frustrates me the most with the courts is you can have the facts sitting right in front of the judge for him to see, and you can see the constitutional violations or the illegal search and seizures, but they look for that legal loophole to deny. They look for the legalities. And okay, you didn't argue these 3 or 4 prongs that it has to fit in order to, have us look at it. Well, just look at the facts. It's more common sense. If you see this was done and it's illegal, then let's get to the bottom of it, you
Yeah.
know, right then and there. Don't don't come back and say, oh, we're denying this because of a technicality. You didn't have the right number of pages, or you didn't have the right,
You were
spacing,
one
or
day late.
Yeah.
yeah, like come on, just take the time and read it, because that person took the time and the effort to put in to submit it to you because they feel like they do have a valid, you know, argument or case. And even though they don't argue it the way it's supposed to, it's probably just because he can't afford an attorney to do it for him. So he has to improvise. And, it's frustrating because I think, I don't know if you guys have watched that Maya Moore story
Hmm.
with, have you seen that? You
I'm,
know,
I'm I'm familiar. I haven't. There's so many things I have to get to, but that is one of them. Yes.
and it's so inspiring and it's so true. And it just, one little Brady violation that the family was able to uncover. And then once they were able to, um, start advocating and hiring attorneys, when Maya Moore came into the picture, you know, they were able to get his conviction overturned, and he was exonerated. And if just the normal everyday person filed a pro se motion with that same Brady violation, what are their chances of actually getting it looked at?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have less than a minute left here on the Zoom.
Okay.
Ladies, thank you. Miss
Thank
Connie,
you.
thank you for joining in on this discussion and providing the facts that you have. I guess we can reconvene after we hear something and we find something out. So until then, you guys be safe. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take
Yeah.
care.
Yep, take care.
Bye.
So that's it, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. I do apologize for the cuts, for the Zoom, all of that crap. But this is it, man. Again, my point: prosecutorial misconduct and the power that they have when it comes to getting things done that they want to get done, because they feel like this is a bad person, and no matter what, whether he did the crime or not, they're getting him off the street, or whether they're running their own corrupt organization and they're eliminating people to cover up that organization. The power, the point is that these prosecutors are off the chain. They're off the chain, and we need to strip them of their immunity immediately. All prosecutors need to be stripped of their immunity immediately, ASAP. You need to be held accountable for your egregious decisions and locking innocent people up and withholding evidence and lying and all of the things that you do in order to get your convictions. All of that needs to stop ASAP. And that's it, period. There's nothing else to say. Until that happens, again, I'm not negotiating with terrorists. If you're not coming to me with trying to strip prosecutorial immunity, immunity from Congress, some of these officials in Congress, because it's the same thing. If you're not coming to me and you're not willing to do these things or do what it takes to have immunity eradicated out of our judicial system, in our Senate and in our floor, then you're amongst them. You're paid. You're a spy. You're a terrorist. Because that's what's tearing our nation apart. That's what's tearing our nation apart. So, again, thank you guys for joining in. This is the story of George Skates and Arthur Smith. It's horrible, man. It's horrible. It's horrible what we've become and what we do to our own people. So that's it, man. I hope you guys enjoyed. Until the next time, you guys stay blessed, stay loved, man. And we're going to try to stay gangster and positive in this shit, man, and move through together. We together, man. We together. We doing it. Peace. I'm out.